We're joined in the studio with our regular visitor Dave Hale from the Sheppey Horticultural Society. Dave, are there any plants you can be planting at this time of year?
Just take a trip up Sheerness High Street and you can see everybody's selling plants.
Yeah.
And garden centres, obviously garden centres, nurseries, and as I said, even the high street shops are getting in on the gardening act, the plant pack type act, you know. And they've been gearing themselves up for the past few weeks, displaying half-hardy annuals, bedding plants, the things like pansies, fuchsias, primulas of all the different colours, which will provide you with an early spring colour. Very, very useful when something has been so awful over the winter. You really do need some spring colour now, so that kind of thing is happening. Hanging baskets and tubs and pots, you see there's a plethora of those kinds of things around. Whether or not you want to put your own combination together or whether you want to buy, that's entirely up to you. Narcissi and daffodils generally are now largely going over, so why not try something different with a different colour? And something which has come up recently, and I grow them myself, are bulb irises, which are superb statuesque plants anyway, which you can plant now for a display in a couple of months' time. Basically, the sooner they're in, the sooner you'll get the flowers, if you know what I mean. There's a word of warning, though. It's been a balmy few days, and it's been the weather's been pretty good to Sheppey and Sheerness generally, but it's still somewhat, and I hesitate to use the word capricious, it's still a bit uneven, the weather,
yeah.
As you probably realise. It's a bit cold outside the studio here tonight. There are still large temperature variations between the night and day, so some protection for the less hardy plants could still be necessary before that threat of frost passes. Now, I know people say that Sheppey doesn't get the frosts that other places get, but you still need to be very much aware. What is interesting, as I said to you, my apologies for coming late in the evening, I asked around the table at the meeting I was at earlier for things which you can be planting at this time. As you can see, I'm holding it up. Obviously your viewers can't see it,
no,
but they can see that list is pretty much endless, and I just asked for a few suggestions. Inevitably things like fruit bushes, raspberries, gooseberries, blueberries, which you can grow in pots with an acid soil, you know, ericaceous compost. Apples, pears, cordons, espaliers, all of those kinds of things are available for planting now. Lilies, irises, which I've just mentioned, other perennial bedding plants. There's one particular one I have in my garden called, it's a Brunnera, and it's called Jack Frost. It's a very, very pretty little plant with an ice blue little flower which really should clump up very nicely indeed. I absolutely love it because it comes back year after year with not much tending. That's Brunnera, B-R-U-N-N-E-R-A, and it's called Jack Frost. It's a particularly nice one. So planting now is as wide and as varied as the stocks available in the shops and the high street and the nurseries. Not forgetting, of course, my main raison d'etre, of course, is potatoes, broad beans, early salad vegetable, peas. All of those kinds of things are going in now as well. So it's as wide as you want to make it, and it's as long as the choice that you actually want to make yourself. It's really a huge thing. It's a busy time.
We are talking to Dave Hale this evening from the Sheppey Horticultural Society, right here at BRFM 95.6. Dave, if you are planning to go out in the garden over the next couple of weeks or at the weekend and the allotment plot, what can you be getting on with?
Weather permitting, of course.
Yeah.
This weather will hold. I'm keeping my fingers crossed and I'm licking the air, put it that way. It's definitely the busiest time of the year, that goes without saying. It's made even busier and later by the winter weather that we've been talking about almost ad infinitum, I think, all gardeners have. It's, as I say, it's much busier, and the season maybe is a little later, and it just seems to hang on. It just seems to hang on forever. But I've put some bullet points down here actually. So plan the garden or the plot, and consider changing the layout if necessary. In effect, there are no hard and fast rules about gardening. It's what you like as a gardener. Nobody else will tell you that shouldn't be there, that shouldn't be there. It's your choice. It always has been. Clear away the old and the dead plant material. There's still a lot of it still around, actually, simply because it's a leftover from not being able to get on the garden because we've had such a terrible winter. And get it ready to compost if that material is ready to compost. I'm not suggesting old twiggy stuff, really woody twiggy stuff, but the softer stuff, get that ready to compost or put it in your compost heaps. Use the already composted, the rotted down material on your garden, both as a feed and as a mulch around your established plants, and dig it into bare soil to get the new acquisitions away if you've bought plants recently. If you remember, we were talking in the previous question there, the list of what you can buy in the shops or what you can buy in the garden centres is almost ad infinitum. Worms will also take the material into the soil as well, so welcome the worms. They'll also aerate the soil for you as well and give it a turnover, a cleanness in effect. Prune where necessary, that's still important actually. Cut back any dead, untidy, too large or crossing branches. Basically you're trying to let the light into the centre of the plant. You see it so often, don't you, where the outside leaves are looking perfectly healthy but the rest of the plant on the inside is a little dead in effect. So let the light in, and check for any damage to old established trees. As a slight digression, my neighbour has a poplar which sits some way from his house, and we've just noticed that the bark is starting to come off his tree. So it's a very old established tree, and you need to be aware of the fact that old established trees don't last forever and ever and ever. They're not all giant redwoods which last for thousands of years. Clean and disinfect any pots that will be in use again this year. That cuts down on the risk of infection. So something like Jay's fluid or something like a solution of Jay's fluid will clean and disinfect your pots for you. You'd be surprised how much gets left over, simply because your pots have been lying around all winter as well, and your flower pots. Make sure your tools are fit for the purpose, and that they're in good working order. Sharp knives are better than blunt ones around the garden. I know to my cost, actually. The amount of force when you're trying to open something with a blunt knife inevitably could lead to an accident. Tip out potted plants. Here's one. I actually did this over the weekend. Tip out the potted plants that you've already got, the established plants, and search for any overwintered vine weevil grubs. You'll recognise them because they look like little maggots with an orange head. They're about a quarter of an inch long, white, curled, and they have a tiny little head, and they usually live just under the surface in your pots. Now they can cause untold damage. The adult weevil itself is a little grey beetle, again about a quarter of an inch long, and you'll see it on your established plants. Destroy that as well, but it's really a case of raking amongst in the surface of your pots and looking for vine weevil grubs, because they will feed on the roots, and you'll start to wonder why your plant, which was previously very healthy, is suddenly dying. You won't know unless you actually sort of scrape and investigate. So I did that. I've got 2 established lemon trees in pots, large pots. So my wife and I spent some time just scraping away the earth to make sure there were no vine weevil grubs in there. We did find one actually, so that was immediate destruction. So tip out the potted plants. Go on a search and destroy mission for slugs and snails. We say it every time, but they can cause untold damage as well, especially when you've got new plants, which will probably cost you, in the pocket, and money, good money. Why are you throwing it? Go on a search and destroy mission for slugs and snails. As I say, it's not only your precious plants that are waking up to the warmer weather, so are the snails and the slugs. Allow yourself, and this is very important, we did this again over the weekend in the sunshine, allow yourself a little time to relax and enjoy your garden, and your plot, and your pot, and your plants. And on the allotment, things will have been a little bit more feverish, and the season for planting is a little bit later than usual, and you would be surprised at the number of people that I've seen over the last week trying desperately to catch up and get things in. They're like, if you speeded the film up, it would be like ants feverishly gathering stuff away. So the ground's being tilled, all the stuff, sown onions, spring onions are going in, all those kind of hardy vegetables are going in. The more tender ones like courgettes, marrows, sweet corn, tomatoes, they come in a month or so's time. So yeah, it's a very, very busy time.
We are talking to Dave Hale from the Sheppey Horticultural Society. Dave, what sort of useful tips do you have for us for this time of year?
I think, again, I was asking opinions on this. Tips were coming out of the woodwork this evening, but certain things that you can actually obviously do. You plan to grow your veg, if you're growing vegetables, plan to grow your veg by making sure you rotate the crops around your vegetable plot. That keeps down the risk and the build-up of soil-borne pests and diseases. So we're talking about crop rotation. Be aware of that. I've mentioned this already, but I can't mention it often enough. It's keep your tools sharp and clean. Minimises the risk of accidents with too much exertion if something is blunt, obviously. Dig only when the soil is reasonably dry. Now, I know that sounds silly outside because the Sheppey soil seems to be cracking up already. But the point is, if it does get wet, or if we do have a couple of wet days, never actually dig a soil when it's wet enough to stick to your boots and tools. What you're doing is you're running the risk of compacting the soil. It ruins the structure, and it defeats the purpose of digging it in the first place. So if you can keep off it while it's wet and let it be moist, that's all it needs. Compost is ready for use when it smells pleasant. There is no smell to decent compost. It smells very rich and pleasant, actually. It's dark brown, it's moist, and it's crumbly. For compost, obviously, you can use peelings, eggshells, tea leaves. Empty the bags first. Not everybody has leaf tea. I'm the world's worst miscreant where that's concerned. Shredded paper is perfectly all right, actually, as well. Garden waste, it goes without saying. Spent compost, spent potting compost, grass clippings. But one thing with grass clippings, they're usually quite wet and moist in their own right. Don't make a layer of grass clippings too deep. Mix them up with other stuff as well, because what will happen is it will just start to smell, and it won't keep the heat.
It goes very liquidy, doesn't it?
That's basically it. It goes very slimy in effect. Yeah, I couldn't think of the word. Don't use diseased or pest-ridden plants in your compost. Perennial weeds as well, things like dock, ground elder, and that perennial pain, couch grass. Actually, they have a lifespan you would not believe, and their seeds and what have you will probably last. Their roots will probably last the length of the period that they will be in your compost heap anyway. If you're going to use them, make sure you kill them off by not having them in the compost for some considerable time, if you've got the space. Soak hard seeds overnight to help them germinate more quickly. I'm thinking of something like Morning Glory, which is a beautiful blue flower, which is a climber, Ipomea. Wonderful plant for covering a pergola quite quickly. It looks very continental, very European, but it has a very hard, like pea-like seed. Soak them overnight for 24 hours. We don't all have acres of space to consider the eventual height and spread of a tree or shrub before buying it, so decide where the space is going to be, how much space you can actually allot to a particular tree. Not forgetting, of course, things like willows or what have you. I would not suggest putting them into a garden, or sycamore, but at the same time you need to consider the size or the eventual size of any plant. Is it going to overshadow what's next door to it? What will happen actually to it? And if you're able to afford it, buy large perennials in pots. I keep getting this word plots and pots mixed up. I do apologise for that. But if you're buying perennials, buy as large as you possibly can. They can be divided straight away. Yeah, they could give you 3 or 4 plants. We've seen it so often on gardening programmes where they will literally buy a large plant and cut it into four plants. You've paid for one, but you've got 4 out of it, and they will go on and grow on themselves, actually. One other thing as well, a lot of people because it's been such a bad winter, a lot of people have been feeding birds. Brilliant, we all do it. But birds and bees still need feeding because they have young, and they will grow up to be adults, and they will help you. They're your friends, in fact, but they're your friends 365 days a year rather than just over winter. So birds and bees are still very, very important indeed. A lot of the birds, for instance, if you're feeding them, will come up with 2 or 3 broods a year. So that will help in your garden. They're still your best friends in the garden.
We are talking to Dave Hale from the Sheppey Horticultural Society right here at BRFM 95.6.